Attention shoppers! In 2015, Superstore opened its doors, giving us a working-class sitcom set in the ominous aisles of a store not entirely unlike Walmart. We saw an expansive cast from various lives and backgrounds, all deal with bizarre customers, uncaring corporate overlords, and the constant struggle of surviving on a pittance. Superstore was a network sitcom in an era where networks were on the decline, and its success on streaming platforms reflects where the market was and is heading. It was also a showcase of how real issues impact ordinary working-class folks, giving audiences an understanding of the lives of the people who make our societies function. The creation of Superstore starts with writer Justin Spitzer. Having first found writing work on Scrubs and Committed, Spitzer found major success writing for the American version of The Office. After The Office ended, Spitzer worked with Ruben Fleischer's production company, The District, to develop an idea for a new sitcom. Spitzer described his interest in workplace sitcoms, saying, "I think I'm always in development looking for small, real, relatable ideas. And I like workplace shows because it's an opportunity to bring very different types of people together, and they have to be together whether they like it or not." The idea of placing the series in a Superstore specifically, though, came to him completely by chance.
My father-in-law was an attorney at a firm that at the time was litigating a class action suit against Walmart, and he was talking to me about it. And I was like, man, that's a show I really would rather be writing than whatever the hell I was writing at the time.
The pilot script came together well enough that when it was shown to NBC, they thought it was one of the strongest pilot scripts they had seen that year, and they picked it up in January of 2015. The original title for the series was The Greatest Love Story Ever Told, which Spitzer used because even though he had hoped to just do a show about people working at a store, he thought adding a romantic element would help sell the idea. However, after several romantic comedies failed to find an audience on network TV at the time, it was NBC that suggested a name change, eventually turning the title of the series into Superstore. Fun bit of trivia is that while Jonah and Amy are often considered the main love story in the series, the original pilot was actually going to use that as a mislead, and the audience wouldn't know what the greatest love story was going to be. With the pilot picked up, casting began for the series. An interesting choice for the casting process is that very few of them had identities attached to them during casting. This created the opportunity for a wider variety of actors to audition from a variety of different backgrounds and identity groups, with emphasis placed on acting talent and chemistry with other actors. Once cast, the identity of the actor would then inform the character. A great example of that is the series' star, America Ferrera, who played Amy Sosa. At the time, Ferrera had recently starred in Ugly Betty for 4 seasons, where she was the first Latina woman to win a Golden Globe for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series. Spitzer said in an interview with Vox, "Every year, America is someone people want. When her name came up, I didn't even think it was possible she'd want to do it. I figured, please, she hasn't agreed to do a show in 4 years. She's not going to want to do a sitcom. So we kind of took a flyer and went out, and were very, very pleasantly surprised when she agreed to do it." What drew Ferrera to the role, in addition to the strength of the script, was how so many of the characters were written without assigned identities.
Amy was the first role I was ever offered that wasn't written as a Latina. But when you spent your entire career only getting roles that have been written into one specific box, it's actually a moment where you go, whoa, I just got offered something that wasn't, written as the firecracker.
When America Ferrera was cast as Amy, that character then inherited Ferrera's Honduran heritage, something that wasn't part of the character when she was initially conceived. This is an example of how the identities of actors would shape the characters. In an interview, Ferrera described Amy saying, "With Amy, we make all sorts of assumptions because she works at a superstore, she's Latina, and had a child when she was young. Real life is complicated. The first thing we see is never the real story. The show sets up everything to be turned upside down. We are defying those assumptions and expectations. I think that's the subtle magic of our show." Amy is the overworked and underappreciated backbone of the Ozark Highlands Cloud9 Superstore, somehow holding it together while working with fools and at the same time raising a daughter home and living with a husband who she married a bit too quickly.
I need this for work, driving, doorknobs.
We just need to put it in a cold, airtight container. We'll get it to the hospital. They'll reattach it. It's easy.
Promise?
Mm-hmm.
The other lead on the show, and the only other role directly offered to an actor, was Jonah Sims, played by Ben Feldman. Feldman had already appeared in several hits, including Mad Men and Silicon Valley. Before being offered the role, Feldman had been working on the show A to Z, which had been canceled by NBC. And even though he was against doing another comedy, particularly one on the network where his show was just canceled, the strength of the script for Superstore won him over. Spitzer described pitching the character to Feldman saying, A to Z was very heavily a romantic comedy, and the pilot of Superstore felt more like a romantic comedy than I think I ever meant the show to be. So one thing I had to tell him was, no, this is not a show about whether Jonah and Amy are going to get together and what beautiful sweet thing is Jonah going to do. Basically that the show would allow him to be a more rounded comedic character than that. Feldman described it, saying, you can ask anybody that went through this most recent pilot season in Hollywood and they'll tell you, this was the best comedy. So what drew me to the role was the hopes that I could crowbar my way onto the show somehow. Jonah is the viewer's guide into the world of Cloud9, a business school dropout taking a step into the world of retail at a large store in St. Louis.
There are people who do nothing, and there are people who do something. And I am one of those people. The something group.
Colton Dunn was cast as Garrett McNeil, Cloud9's cynical announcement reader. Dunn had made a few appearances on television before Superstore, notably as part of the animal control team on Parks and Recreation, though Dunn had largely distinguished himself as a writer, particularly for the series Key and Peele, where he was twice nominated for an Emmy. The character of Garrett was written as being in a wheelchair in the original script before casting, but there was difficulty finding a disabled actor who was right for the role. Eventually, Dunn was cast, and it was debated as to whether or not the character should be taken out of the wheelchair, as Dunn is able-bodied. Dunn discussed this in an interview.
But I think after thinking about it, and talking to a lot of people, I felt like it was important to have that character represented. And I wanted to show the diversity of that group of people.
Garrett is, of course, far more than his disability. His sarcastic sense of humor hides a kindness that has been worn down after years of working at Cloud9.
How exactly did a non-Vitamix Splendor put you in a coma?
That's a very offensive question to ask a disabled person.
Lauren Ash was cast as assistant manager Dina Fox. Originally from Belleville, Ontario, Ash started her career as a comedian and appeared on several Canadian TV shows. Her appearance on Superstore would be her highest profile role so far. Prior to working on Superstore, Ash had similar working experience at a Canadian retail chain.
I worked in one of these stores in high school in Canada. It's called Zellers. No Canadians, okay.
Originally, the character of Dina was meant to be very harsh and uncompromising. In an interview, Justin Spitzer explained, I wanted her to be a hard ass that you would find likable over a long period of time. Lauren Ash is an amazing actress, and Dina became likable a lot faster. Ash has said in several interviews that she had absolute confidence in getting the role, as she envisioned the character very clearly in her mind, modeled off a character that she had been using on stage at Second City. Dina is supremely confident and a stickler for the rules. She's a bit off-putting at first, but she's a fierce friend and a lover of birds.
Look, I'm a Christian too, but in these four walls, my Bible is the employee code of conduct.
We all thank you for it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Another of the few exceptions of a character written with a certain identity in mind was Mateo, though the original idea of making him Hispanic completely vanished when Nico Santos got the role, which is probably when Mateo got the last name Liwanag. The Filipino actor and comedian had success as a stand-up comic, but it was his appearance on Superstore that would be his first major role. Santos's casting didn't just change the character's ethnicity, though.
When I read the script and I was reading Mateo's lines, I was all like, this is something a shady queen would say. So that's kind of just how I interpreted the character. And thank God they were like, well, turn it into a shady queen.
Santos is very visibly queer, and it was very important to him to have the character Mateo embrace that.
There was a very long time, like in the 90s, where gay characters would had to be masculine and white and all that. And I'm like, listen, I'm brown, I'm queer. I want most of the characters that I play to be unapologetically queer, because you know what? Time's up.
In addition to being unapologetically queer, Mateo also has the distinction of being undocumented, something revealed at the beginning of the second season. It was that piece that Santos describes as completing the character in his mind. In an interview, he said, "We've added an in-depth layer that explains a lot of his nature and why he's so acidic, why he's so hyper-competitive. The stakes are very high for him, and that's where his soul venom comes from." Mateo is the ambitious new hire who joins Cloud9 at the same time as Jonah. Jonah's easygoing attitude was in stark contrast to the far more intense Mateo.
I hung up everything that was in the dressing rooms, and I organized it by style, color, size, and relevance of designer.
Joining the crew as another sales associate was Nicole Sakura, who played Cheyenne Lee. Originally going by the stage name Nicole Bloom, Sakura had appeared in a few projects before Superstore, notably the American version of the series Shameless. After she got the role, she came up with the idea of applying for a job at Target so she could get some real-world experience.
Such a great opportunity to really like dig into a character, and I wanted to know what it was like to work at a Target. So I went and applied, and they were not interested in me.
Nico Santos went through the same experience of getting rejected by Target, which kind of foreshadows how Cheyenne and Mateo would become fast friends as the series progressed. When we first meet Cheyenne, she's a pregnant teenager considering a future with her boyfriend Beau, played by Johnny Pemberton. Although Cheyenne certainly comes across as naive, she's a decent person who really grows into an unexpected authority figure by the end of the series.
Thank you for shopping at Cloud9. Oh, I put my phone in his bag.
The principal cast in the first season was rounded out with Mark McKinney playing Glenn Sturgis. McKinney is almost certainly best known for his time in the Canadian sketch comedy troupe The Kids in the Hall, which had a series that ran from 1988 to 1995. Following that, he spent some time on Saturday Night Live and would go on to appear in numerous TV and film projects. McKinney decided to add a bit of a twist to the character while auditioning by giving him a unique voice he had used in the past.
The second I just sort of upped it into this range, it's like it went from black and white to color.
Glenn is a gentle Midwestern guy, deeply religious and very nice. Much like other characters refuse to be reduced to a quirk, Glenn's religious personality reflects his naivete, but also his kindness and generosity.
Balloons are like our souls. They want to go up, but can't. And when you pop them, they scream.
Superstore was very much an ensemble cast, so much so that guest stars would recur throughout the series' run, in time having storylines of their own. Kaliko Kauahi as Sandra Kalani would eventually become a full cast member in Season 5, and over 20 other actors would grow to have recurring roles over the show's run. Although some of these actors were present in the first season, it was the later seasons that would give them the opportunity to further develop their characters. The location for filming Superstore would prove a special challenge. Giant stores like Walmart and Target are known for their cavernous interiors, often bigger than the typical set for a sitcom. And stocking an entire store would far exceed the budget for a humble network series. For the pilot, they found a Kmart to fill in, but after the pilot was shot, that Kmart became unavailable, so they had to create a similar-looking space on their own. Justin Spitzer explained in an interview, "We have an amazing production designer, Michael Gallenberg, and he and his crew made this phenomenal-looking store here on the Universal lot. It feels super real, and I think there have been often times when we're working on something in the writer's room and we're a little blocked. And we'll just walk around the set and look for ideas and ways to interact with the environment, which is so helpful." The set of Superstore uses a number of tricks, such as mirrors and giant photographs, to create the illusion of it being a much bigger space than it actually is. Superstore's expansive cast and seemingly gigantic set created the real impression that this store was a real, functioning place, filled with actual employees. The attention to detail was so fine that even the cash registers had working scanners. Actors would also mention in interviews that visitors were especially delighted to walk onto a set that felt a lot like walking into a real store. Superstore was picked up as a series in May of 2015. Although it was meant to be part of NBC's winter 2016 lineup starting on January 4th, the network decided to air 2 episodes of the series early, so Superstore opened its door for the first time on November 30th, 2015. The opening of Superstore's first episode gives us a montage of the various customers that shop at Cloud9, a big box retail chain. This particular branch is located in St. Louis, Missouri. These visual gags would be a staple for the series, though originally they were just the show's creator, Justin Spitzer, trying to come up with plot ideas. He said in an interview, "It also occurred to me that we were going to be in this one space all the time, and if we want to show the passage of time, I'm going to have to go to an exterior shot. How many times do you want to see the outside of the same store again and again and again?" So I thought that was a great way to suggest the passage of time, and I can use it for freebie jokes, and I can kind of pepper them throughout the show. We meet Amy as she sells an engagement ring of dubious quality, and when she goes on break, she runs into the newly hired Jonah.
I know. I don't seem like the kind of person who would work in a place like this.
Yeah.
Of course, Jonah soon learns that Amy is his coworker.
Little tip. Don't let the other workers here know how much better than them you are. They hate that.
And you might have noticed Amy's name tag reads Ramona. She changes it in each episode.
I just don't like random strangers using my name like we're buddies.
Right, like how hookers don't like to be kissed on the lips.
As the episode moves along, we're introduced to the various characters of Cloud9 and establish some key dynamics. Assistant manager Dina and manager Glenn don't get along. Garrett is an early friend to Jonah, and Amy is a sort of mother figure to Cheyenne. The main contrast here, though, is between Jonah and Amy. Jonah brings a wide-eyed sense of wonder that is deflated by Amy's pragmatic realism.
That doesn't mean we can't have a little fun at work, does it? Or try and find some moments of beauty in the everyday?
Wait, I'm sorry. Did you really just use the phrase moments of beauty?
Even a plastic bag can be breathtaking.
Wow, that really blew my mind.
As we get to know Amy, though, we see there's a bit more to her than being a downer.
I stock these glow stars every single year for the back to school sale. Tomorrow is going to be just like today. And I know that because today is just like yesterday. So sometimes it's just kind of hard to find those moments of beauty.
Cheyenne's boyfriend, Beau, the guy buying the ring from Amy in the first scene, makes a big splash with his second attempt at a proposal to Cheyenne. Dina, thinking it's a robbery, decides to kill the lights.
What is this?
Moment of beauty?
It's a lovely visual, though you do wonder how Jonah pulled this off on his first day. The episode includes subtle hints of a budding romance between Jonah and Amy, even though we learn at the end of the episode that Amy is married. But more than the clear attraction between the two of them, their philosophies will underscore much of the themes of this show. How hope for a better world is tempered by the reality of the one we're currently living in, and where that cynicism comes from. The moment of beauty Jonah offers, as simple as it may be, creates the opportunity to dream for something bigger. Think that there's something more than the drudgery of daily existence, an existence that tells us it's the way it's always been and the way it always will be. But on the other hand, it's not as though Amy never had dreams herself. It's Jonah's first day at Cloud 9, while Amy has been there for over 10 years. Her concern for Cheyenne, who she sees herself in, reveals that she has hope for other people to avoid the mistakes she's made. It's wonderful she can do that for another person, but it's a shame she doesn't have that same hope for herself. A small speech from Garrett about Pandora's box, funnily enough, sets up the themes for the series.
There was only one thing left inside: hope. I wonder what will be left inside of this box. Could it be Grace? I hope not. If you're Grace's parents, please pick her up at customer service.
If Jonah is offering hope, Amy is offering grace. The pilot also helped establish the look of the series, opting for a style that made the viewer feel like they were watching the events of each episode unfold without it turning into a documentary.
He established these long lens looks where you could, like as the viewer, you could just be someone standing in the store, looking past two aisles, overhearing a conversation.
The series also made room for a lot of improv, particularly in break room scenes. Mark McKinney and Lauren Ash were known for their tendency to improv with one another, something they did in the pilot episode.
I pray for you, Dina.
Pray for you too, Glenn.
I'm praying right now.
Praying so hard.
I'm praying harder than you. I know how.
Come on, what's wrong with you? Garrett, give me a beat or something. Okay, the finger of the devil is poking through the foam.
Cry, Ezekiel, cry it out.
Although this would be the only episode filmed in an actual store, the look would remain pretty consistent throughout the rest of the series, and the characters would grow from the firm foundations that were established in this episode, making this a pilot with much of the series already shaped and ready to go on into many episodes in the future.
Cloud9's lawyer will also be present. He advises we answer every question honestly, but try and downplay their liability.
One of the clear mandates of Superstore is to tell real stories about regular working-class people. While it's certainly through the lens of a sitcom, so the characters are silly, the issues and concerns they have are typically more grounded. In an interview, executive producer Gabe Miller said, "Having our characters talking about what people in the real world are talking about at the moment makes it feel more current and real. When an issue comes up, we try to consider it from all sides and have all sides represented." America Ferrera also spoke to that, saying,
Everybody comes from such different backgrounds. It's not just diversity of skin color, diversity of race, it's diversity of life experience.
Although Superstore would gain a reputation as a show that tackled issues, it never quite came across as preachy. A great example is in the third episode, Shots and Salsa, where Amy expresses concerns over another worker playing into Latino stereotypes to convince people to try some salsa at a sample stand.
Suggesting that maybe you don't need to resort to Hola, señorita.
Things escalate when Mateo joins in, admittedly giving himself an extremely cool new name.
Soy Jose. Jose was born in a small village near Oaxaca.
I was actually born in Toronto, for the record. In another show, Amy would find a way to teach Carmen and Mateo a lesson about how racist caricatures are bad, and we'd all feel special for defeating racism. But in Superstore, Amy ends up using a racist caricature herself to make her point, and that instead leads us to seeing how a big company like Cloud9 tackles this issue with a video.
Racism. You hear a lot about it, but what is it, really? Over the next 60 minutes, we are...
When Amy finds out proceeds from the salsa goes to help orphans, she decides to play into the stereotype to start moving more jars. When Carmen sees Amy's performance, Amy is forced to confront her hypocrisy and acknowledge Carmen was just doing what her job expected from her. We don't need Superstore to tell us that racism is bad, and that's not really what this episode is about, at least not primarily. It's about how working-class people often have jobs that feel degrading and can have a negative social impact that is out of their control. Both Glenn and Dina, as management, encourage Amy and Carmen to play into stereotypes to sell the salsa. While this does feed into something ugly, it's not exactly how it's understood by the people who fuel that system. As we can see, the reactions from the customers is that they respond to authenticity, only that their vision of what authentic is happens to be a stereotype. There are many failures here that are simply beyond the control of Amy or Carmen. It's a sophisticated look at racism in the workplace, not presenting it as the product of some obviously evil guy in charge, but rather a system of variables that includes well-meaning people, an indifferent corporation, and an ignorant public. And in order for a working-class person to survive, sometimes that might involve choosing to turn a blind eye to perpetuating a negative stereotype. It's not that anyone is right or wrong, but rather that sometimes these issues don't present themselves into neat little boxes where we can take a righteous stand against an obvious evil. Many episodes in the first season had a tendency to end without any real feeling of resolution. But in this case, the lack of resolution is a great explanation for why Amy feels so disillusioned by her job. It's easy to judge someone like her for giving up on her principles, but after working at a place for more than 10 years, how easy is it to keep fighting every battle? Especially when you seem to be losing so many of them. A better question to ask is, how does a workplace do this to its employees? Although the creators set out to have a show that wasn't trying to make any specific statement, many of the episodes still very much read otherwise, something America Ferrera noticed in the script for the very first episode.
I remember feeling like, oh, there's really something super special and smart and funny and warm and did have something to say, even though Justin didn't want it to have anything to say.
A lot of this comes from the fact that the show itself is an attempt to tap into the culture of that time in a way that reflected how people were feeling. When the things people experience in their lives become politically charged topics, to depict them at all can be seen as a form of commentary. Part of depicting ordinary working-class people involved bringing many different types of those people together, something you will likely see every day at giant big box stores. The deliberate choice by the series bridges the gap between different kinds of people and experiences. One thing Superstore does well by bringing in so many diverse people together realistically is that it shows us, more or less, we can all get along. And when there is any discord, as there always will be in large groups of people, it's a product of personality clashes rather than trying to suggest certain kinds of people simply can't get along. If there is a villain to be found in the series, it's almost certainly the Cloud9 corporate office, which often hands down impersonal mandates or enforces policies that make life needlessly complicated for the workers we know and love. We get plenty of examples of that in the first season, but one of the better ones is in the episode All Nighter, which begins with everyone having to update the store's signs.
They say the old signs were this pale, outdated color called glossy dolphin. The new ones are a bold, exciting color called glossy dolphin B.
In this episode, we also find out how Glenn ended up working at Cloud9.
My family used to own a hardware store. Sturgis and Sons? Well, until Cloud9 moved in up the street, and then a month later, we lost everything.
As everyone tries to finish up their work, the store's lights go out and the doors are locked because they're controlled by the corporate computer, so everyone is stuck inside. When Glenn tries to find a way to override the computer, he finds memos that show what corporate's real concerns are.
Union buzzwords.
Spotty union.
Anti-union activity.
What to do if you hear the word union.
Reporting union activity.
And the typically easygoing Glenn rages against the machine.
And sometimes the folks in charge don't treat me like I'm a human being with feelings. I mean, where do they get off? Keep us late and locked in the dark, all in service of the bottom line.
Yeah.
Although the Cloud9 employees have all done bad things throughout the series, often hurting one another, corporate never really gets a chance to redeem itself, in part because it's not actually a character. Rather, it's a giant system that demands these people work, often doing ridiculous things, in the hunt to increase corporate profits. As the first season progresses, there is a growing sense of the injustice of it all, and gradually the workers begin to get fed up. In the finale to the first season, we get the episode Labor. In it, Cheyenne is wondering what she'll do once she gives birth since Cloud9 doesn't offer paid maternity leave.
I can't go home. I need the hours, for this little girl.
Did you guys know that in every other first world nation, paid maternity leave is just automatic?
Well, no, you are not going to forward us another article.
When Jonah and Amy try to plead Cheyenne's case to corporate, a casual reference to unions leads to things spiraling out of control.
Typically, their employees would be in unions.
I'm transferring now. Please hold.
What are you doing? Why would you say that?
We've got Howard, Sue, Cheryl, Keith, Guillermo, Renee, and Alan here. How you doing?
Hi.
The store gets a visit from a union buster named Steve, played by Dan Bugatinsky.
Does anyone here know who I am? Oh, I know. A union buster.
Steve does nothing to help anybody, aside from corporate, while Jonah encourages everyone to voice their complaints, which include a lack of benefits, no raises, and other challenges of working at Cloud9.
It's like we don't have any leverage. Maybe we should form a union.
We couldn't even agree on a theme for our summer barbecue. Ended up being 1980s Arabian Nights under the sea Harry Potter.
In the meantime, Cheyenne gives birth. With Cheyenne not getting any maternity leave, Glenn decides to suspend her for 6 weeks with pay. So Cloud9 fires him.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, they let me go.
Although Glenn has been the mouthpiece for some bad policy ideas in the past, he's otherwise been a pretty decent guy, often trying to do what he can for his workers so they have a better experience on the job. And what he did for Cheyenne was obviously very kind. His firing is the event needed to get Amy on board with Jonah's plan. And with Amy on board and Glenn fired, support builds in the store and it leads to a walkout. One of the exceptions is Dina, who decides to scab.
But rest assured, Cloud9 will be fine without you.
It's a very cool ending to the season and presents these characters in a heroic light. It's interesting that Glenn being fired was the straw that broke the camel's back. He was the one good face of management, and him getting fired creates feelings of frustration and anger when the one good thing they had was taken away from everybody. Jonah's arrival was a huge impetus for the strike, since the discussion over benefits and unions came from him. But Amy taking charge reveals how her deep connection with everyone in the store, as well as Glenn's, is necessary to motivate a group of people to make a stand for change. Ferreira described it saying, "In the course of the first season, you go from Amy never expecting anything to change to accidentally leading a walkout, which she would have never imagined herself. Even though I don't think every character has to be out there changing the world or going after great things to be on an interesting track, I do think there is a piece of Amy's journey, however small it may be, that is about awakening to something she lost a long time ago."
America is #1 because it's first in the world.
That's an airtight argument, though.
The response to Superstore was a bit of a mixed bag from critics. After its debut, many of the reviews offered mild criticism or tepid praise. The word potential did get thrown around a lot, in addition to many comparisons to The Office, no doubt due to its creator having worked on that show for so many years. Over the years, this would change as the series eventually became a favorite among critics. It's a bit more difficult to measure how many people were watching in their homes, though, because TV ratings have become increasingly less relevant. Just a decade before Superstore's premiere, a high rating gave you a good idea of how many people were tuning in each night. But in 2015, streaming was becoming a bigger part of the market, and that's where Superstore tended to find most of its success. Whatever the numbers may have been, NBC did have some faith in the series. As a sign of that faith, they renewed Superstore for a second season the day after its finale aired. But before getting back to that walkout cliffhanger, they were instead given a special time slot where they could air an episode after the 2016 Summer Olympics. Another example of how committed NBC was to supporting the series. This time slot was incredibly valuable, and it ended up being the most watched broadcast episode of Superstore, with nearly 10 million people tuning in. To avoid having to deal with the walkout cliffhanger, the Olympics episode takes place sometime during season 1, indicated by the fact that Cheyenne has yet to give birth, so we can tell that this happens before the walkout episode. One interesting fact about this episode is that parts of it had to be approved by an organization representing the Olympics. For example, one of the plot lines had Cecily Strong playing an Olympian who was visiting the store, and a change to the story was requested. Spitzer described the process in an interview, saying, "Originally, we had wanted Dina to be suspicious that Cecily Strong's Missy Jones was on steroids. Big no from the Olympics. We'd also planned for the episode to build to a big confrontation between Missy and Amy, who'd grown up idolizing her, but that version portrayed the Olympian as a more negative character. The episode is perhaps most notable for revealing that Mateo is undocumented.
I went to the green card store personally with my grandmother.
The green card store?
Yeah, they sell green cards and knockoff handbags and bootleg Spider-Man DVDs.
This was not the original plan with Mateo, Spitzer explained. Before this point, it had never even occurred to us to say that Mateo was undocumented. It really just came out of pitching on the Glenn story, that he would start out with this knee-jerk sentiment that America is number one in everything, and that would conflict with Mateo's Filipino pride. Then we wanted to find a way to flip the dynamic, so that Glenn would start pushing multiculturalism, while Mateo became all rah-rah USA, at least outwardly. So that's how we came up with the idea that Mateo might learn he was undocumented and then start pushing too hard to cover it up. The Olympics episode also brought us the debut of Kelly Schumann as Justine. But since Justine is the worst, I'm going to put off talking about her until later.
Sing car wash with me immediately. Work it. Fail! The vocals don't come in for another 10 measures. Also, you have the worst voice I've ever heard.
Will you please take off that stupid fedora?
It completes the look.
You look like Carmen Sandiego.
The ramifications of the walkout at the end of season 1 is difficult to discuss without also talking about Jonah and Amy's relationship. Both of them were instrumental to staging that walkout, and it symbolizes the connection between these two characters. Lots of sound and energy, but not entirely focused. To back up a little bit, some of the things we learn about Jonah and Amy is that their lives have not turned out like they expected. Jonah flunked out of business school, and Amy only intended her Cloud9 job to be for a few months until she found out she was pregnant and got married.
And so I stopped at this random store in St. Louis and saw they were hiring, and
I wonder sometimes what it would have been like if I had made other choices.
As Jonah and Amy, Ben Feldman and America Ferrera have a very natural chemistry together. Feldman described it in an interview saying, "I think America is an incredible actress. I would be surprised to see her on screen with someone where there was not chemistry because she listens, she's smart, she's a great actress, and you just kind of fall into chemistry like that." Amy and Jonah do have a number of barriers between them getting together. In an interview, Justin Spitzer described how he thought there were 2 reasons people don't get together in sitcoms. They either fight too much, like Sam and Diane on Cheers, or there's a person in the way, like Jim and Pam on The Office. For Superstore, he decided to combine those 2 dynamics. Because of that, he thought he created a more genuine will they, won't they scenario, as opposed to other shows which he considers more of a when will they. I think the Jonah and Amy pairing goes quite well with the general dissatisfaction everyone has with Cloud9, especially seen in the walkout episode. It's something that requires Jonah and Amy to work together, but much like how their flirting in season 1 never amounts to more than that, they don't really know what to do with the worker energy that is activated by their walkout. In the season 2 premiere, titled Strike, we can very clearly see that no one knows what they're doing.
We did it.
Yeah.
So do we just go home now?
Corporate sends Jeff, played by Michael Boonen, to negotiate with the workers. Amy only wants Glenn to get his job back at first, but corporate wanting a written apology makes her start demanding more.
We're supposed to give corporate a little something. That's hilarious, because you fired our boss for giving Cheyenne maternity leave. You don't give us overtime, you don't give us health insurance, and we're not allowed to vape in the store. Myrtle's got a...
maybe not as high up on the priority list.
The strike starts to flounder as other movements try to latch on to their energy, and Jeff calls in a bunch of workers from another store to cross the picket line. As everyone feels like they're going to be replaced, people begin to abandon the strike. Although Glenn does get his job back, not much else is gained, and the strike runs out of steam.
You know, just because we go inside doesn't mean it's over. The fight will go on. This was just the first punch.
So, to be continued?
To be continued.
What was so great about this episode was it showed how important organizing is in labor movements, and how the energy to mobilize can't be taken for granted. Cloud9 corporate was clearly ready for a moment like this in a way the workers weren't, and that lack of experience is the problem. But when the episode ends, we can see that, instead of just rolling over, Amy and Jonah haven't given up entirely, and there's still the spark that something might change. In a similar way, Amy and Jonah's romantic tension is a lot of energy going nowhere, while a tiny little spark continues to suggest something might change there too. In this case, it's not a lack of experience in dating and romance that prevents them from getting together, it's Amy's struggling marriage. Neither Jonah or Amy can allow themselves to even consider hooking up, so they don't know what to do with all this energy between them. After the strike, Amy and Jonah's crusade to improve their workplace takes more of a backseat to the romantic tension between the two characters.
Some people think that you wear a wig, and some people think that you have a crush on Amy, and some people think that you're a Sea Org, whatever that is.
Throughout seasons 2 and 3, Amy and Jonah's relationship woes become a greater emphasis in the series than leading another walkout. Even so, the show was never shy to remind the audience just how little Cloud9 cares about its employees.
Speaking of corporate, this memo just came through. This time of year, many of us suffer from seasonal affective disorder. Cloud9 cares. This memo clears parent company of any liability for employee suicide.
Cloud9 really does care.
Season 2 and 3 include Amy getting a divorce and Jonah briefly dating the new employee Kelly, played by Kelly Stables. But in spite of being knocked up again by Adam, Amy still makes a move on Jonah, and the two of them hook up at the end of season 3. This sex scene is actually a very powerful bit of symbolism. This episode, Town Hall, is about Cloud9 holding a town hall meeting where workers are being given the chance to express their grievances to the company CEO, with some topics being forbidden, as seen on the whiteboard next to the new district manager Lori, played by Jennifer Irwin, who replaced Jeff after he quit earlier in the season.
Try and remember this event is going to be live streamed, so let's try to avoid anything controversial, okay?
The off-limit topics include compensations, CEO bonus, benefits, maternity leave, hours, and a bunch of other things that happened in the previous episodes that workers might be upset about. In other words, the Cloud9 crew can ask their boss questions, but none that have anything to do with actually improving their circumstances. To fight the powers that be by digging up some dirt on corporate, Amy and Jonah unite once again, uncovering how Cloud9 falsified performance write-ups to justify firing older employees. Unemployed Jeff confirms it.
There was a mandate to write up any employee over the age of 70 to give us a pretext for firing them. Okay, it didn't matter for what. That's just the corporate culture over there. It's the mindset. Anything's justified as long as it saves $1. Believe me, if there was something I could do to change that, I would.
Well, maybe there is.
Jeff crumbles when he's offered a job in Chicago at corporate headquarters.
If I could ever persuade you to come back to Cloud9, we could definitely use a guy like you in Chicago.
Chicago?
But working on this project is what gets Jonah and Amy back together, hence the hooking up. Unaware that their moment is caught on a hidden camera that was originally meant to broadcast Jeff exposing the truth. Everyone watching people have sex on camera in an episode that was more about corporate being completely terrible really wraps up this show's dynamic. They're having sex at work, but really, all the employees there are getting screwed by their employer. With Amy and Jonah safely together, the series has more time to explore the struggle of workers through them. In seasons 4 and 5, we see a much stronger return to the Cloud9 employees standing up to corporate, and it begins with Amy's maternity leave, or rather, her lack of maternity leave.
I have slept 90 minutes in 3 days. The lining of my uterus is coming out in clumps. I have hemorrhoids so big that my doctor looked at my and said, "Whoa, have you ever had a doctor look at your and say that?" I am wearing frozen diapers so that my doesn't fall out, okay?
Amy's situation, painful as it is, isn't entirely foreign to other workers who had to give birth while working a job that didn't give them the chance to take time off.
And you think you're creating this ridiculous sitcom scenario, and then the response from so many viewers was like, yeah, that's what happened to me. Like, you know, people were like, well, I was laughing until I was crying, and then I couldn't stop crying because it just reminded me of when I had to go back to work days after giving birth to my child.
A few episodes later, we see Jonah and Amy go to a manager's conference, and while there, we get a better idea of what that particular group thinks of low-level employees.
Ask me, floor workers are barely worth $15 a week.
Don't even get me started. Pay us more, give us more hours. I'm on food stamps. It's endless.
It does make one wonder how corporate chooses people to elevate and then showers them with fancy gifts to express their thanks. Much in the same way Jeff was convinced to turn against the employees at Cloud9 by offering him a job. While at the party, Jonah suggests Amy do something to improve her position.
Maybe you should be a manager.
Yeah, right?
Why not?
As Amy goes through the management training program and Glenn considers taking a demotion to spend more time with his newborn, an opening seems to be appearing at the Ozark Highlands Cloud 9, an opening that just happens to be perfect for Amy.
How's the district manager world? Hashtag DM life, right?
I'm still doing some physical therapy from when you ran me over with the golf cart.
Yep. Yeah.
We see her embrace the dark side to get ahead in her career after she catches her district manager doing cocaine.
Okay, yes, I am blackmailing you. If you don't give me the job, I will call corporate and tell them that you are a huge cokehead.
This represents a turn for Amy, as being part of management slowly starts to alienate her from her coworkers. As the season progresses, we see Amy continue her life as a boss, slowly turning her into what she hated.
We have cameras in the break room?
Yeah, it's hidden in the smoke alarm in the corner.
Is that legal?
It's in a gray area. Do you want to hear what they're saying?
You have audio? Is that legal?
Do you want to hear what they're saying?
We would have more empathy for Amy because she's always been presented as the normal, responsible one in the series. But that's not the reason she got the job. She got it via blackmail. And the longer we see her as a manager, the more we see her behave in ways that show us how that job changes someone. When corporate starts cutting back on hours, Amy and Jonah try to get them back by posting negative things about the store on social media, hoping to convince corporate to approve more hours so they can fix up the store. Eventually it backfires though, and when corporate shows up to find out who's been posting the images, Sandra takes the fall. And basking in that moment, she decides to rise up.
We're gonna stand up.
That's right.
And we're gonna stay strong.
There she is.
Yeah, that's it.
And we need to unionize.
When Amy learns that a store in her district might be converted to a distribution center, she suddenly finds herself on the side of busting the union.
All we have to do is keep her from talking about unions. Yes. What?
It just feels weird. Isn't that like literally union busting?
No! We're just trying to stop one lonely, desperate lunatic from running her mouth and costing everybody their jobs.
We're the good guys.
I guess.
We just want Sandra to do what's best for her fellow workers. Or else. As soon as I said it, I heard it.
Because of his connection to Amy, Jonah takes her side in the fight, and we see him selling out his principles too.
Most of us have no education, no skills, and are just generally terrible. No offense. So maybe we should just be happy with what we've got, you know? Because for most of us, this is as good as it's ever gonna get.
But when it comes down to which store is getting closed, it doesn't have anything to do with the union busting Amy was doing. But it's once again Amy using the blackmail card on Lori.
I had 5 Cokes on my way over here, and I've tried to kick the habit, but I just can't seem to do it. I'm a Coke fiend.
It's fine. Lori, you were saying?
Bellridge. I would close Bellridge.
With a labor organizer brought in to talk to the employees, it looked like the workers were closer than ever to finally starting a union. And that realization has an effect on Jonah and helps steer him away from the dark side. But what hits him even harder is the change he sees in Amy.
You're the one who said to keep the union thing under control, and now you want me to give you names? Who are you?
And that's what convinces Jonah to sign the union card.
I'm in. Let's do this.
What makes this dynamic so compelling is that neither Amy or Jonah are entirely in the wrong. Amy is privy to a whole set of corporate concerns that change her understanding of keeping the store open. And Jonah realizes that something as fragile as the energy of the workers can take years to get back. They both think they're doing what's best for the store, but both of them can't be right. Amy's proximity to corporate power is starting to change her, and we can see how easy it is when she's given an excuse to reject her principles that seems rational enough. Jonah may be ignorant of some of those reasons, or at least less trusting in them than Amy, but the sacrifice being asked for here is that the workers give up livable wages and benefits for the benefit of the Cloud9 store. Amy wants to save their jobs now and possibly improve them later, but I think it's fair to ask, when does later ever come, and why are there so many excuses for later to not be today? The finale to Season 4 sees the union effort heat up as Jonah joins in and helps bring other stores on board, and he starts fighting with Amy in the break room.
If you can just help us with our problems, my hours keep getting cut and I don't make a livable wage.
Well, I do help you with that because I pay the rent.
Oh.
All I'm saying is that unions aren't always right, and corporate isn't always wrong.
That's not what you said when they made you come back to work 2 days after having a baby.
Yeah, you were living la vida pissed.
I bet you get maternity leave now, though.
Oh, yeah, there's a really great plan for managers.
It takes a massive reality check to snap Amy out of her new pro-corporate attitude. And that reality check comes in the form of corporate calling in an ICE raid as part of their union busting, putting Mateo at risk.
We have to get Mateo out now.
I'm not sure how happy corporate's going to be about you doing that.
Corporate, I'm done.
Welcome back.
In spite of their best efforts, with even Dina helping, ICE manages to get to Mateo.
Stop, guys. It's okay. It's over.
I'll have more on this a little later when I discuss Mateo in detail, but for Amy, the moment brings her back to her more radical self.
Want to start a union?
The threat of ICE being deployed against workers attempting to unionize has some real-world history, and it reveals how issues such as undocumented status and labor rights intersect with one another. For a show claiming not to be making any statements, it's hard not to notice such a powerful message that both humanizes an often vilified minority group and presenting the solution as a form of worker solidarity. From this point onward, Amy decides to secretly support the union while lying about their progress to corporate.
You're like a double agent. My own Elizabeth Jennings.
Is that from The American?
Yeah, it's so good. You should just...
I'm not gonna watch it.
When the union is formed and Jonah and Sandra travel to Chicago to negotiate a labor contract, they're going with Amy's support.
We don't get to relax. That's kind of the point. No, we go to work mopping up scum in your stores and ruining our knees lifting boxes. And after all of that, we still can't afford rent.
This stuff is kind of complicated.
We'll make it simple for you. Do better, or we go on strike.
Well, it seems like corporate is caving in at first. The truth is that the negotiation was rigged.
Cloud9 just got bought out.
What?
And we were acquired by this big tech company, Zephyra. And the good news is the new company doesn't have to recognize the union contract, so our people were just like, go ahead, agree to whatever, just to end the meeting.
In this moment, there's a real sense of defeat. And when Amy goes to tell Jonah the bad news, she instead lets him enjoy this one day where he thought he finally got a win. It reflects one of the deeper themes of this series, that even when things are bad, people who care about each other can make things a bit more bearable. When we first met Amy and the rest of the Cloud9 crew, there are varying levels of hopelessness when it comes to improving their lives. But as the seasons rolled on, they got a taste for a better future. And importantly, with each attempt to change things, they managed to get a bit closer each time. An unfocused walkout eventually led to getting a meeting with management to hash out a labor deal. And had Cloud9 not been bought by tech giant Zephyra during the meeting, they might have been able to negotiate for something better. Even without that more just workplace, we can see the lives of these characters improving. And there's no better example than Amy and Jonah. They went from aimless to inspired. Amy has found a way to elevate herself financially, and Jonah seems to have a real purpose when it comes to organizing. And of course, they found some happiness in each other. That wouldn't be the end of their story, but for now, I'm going to shift the focus to a less bright part of the series.
Nobody likes Target.
One inescapable fact of Superstore is that it's rampant with product placement. While product placement isn't a new thing in television, being set in a store gives Superstore the opportunity to sell numerous ad spots within itself.
A Minions blanket, and a Minions nightlight, and some Minions candy.
While the show was generally pretty good about weaving in the product placement so it at least felt like a natural part of an episode's story, at least most of the time, there was one instance in Season 3 where it completely failed. In the episode titled Target, Jeff, after having quit Cloud9, announces he got a new job managing the nearby Target. This is revealed to be a lie later on, but not before we get many mentions of Target that feel a lot like ads.
I love Target. I like to call it Target, like it's fancy.
Garrett and Glenn end up going to a Target only to find out it's so nice and everyone is happy.
Wow, it's really nice in here. Wow, the red's so lively, it really pops.
The reason this ad felt particularly intrusive is that it wasn't just a lingering shot or a small joke, but a whole plot line devoted to an advertisement. Making it even worse is that Superstore is advertising the exact kind of business that the show is satirizing. Cloud 9 is certainly over the top with its comedy, but it's still set in the real world, and while most giant stores probably don't have severed feet constantly showing up, workers do still face the same issues Cloud 9 workers do, like a lack of good benefits and poor wages. Target also has a history of union busting, including producing ridiculous anti-union videos like this one.
Refuse to sign and keep Target union-free.
I'm certainly not saying this one episode somehow ruins the show. In fact, there are definitely moments in the episode that are pretty fun, like watching Dina set Amy up on a date. But the ad placement here does cross a line and it sticks out.
Didn't they just find another cut off foot right around here?
Oh, it's awful. I'm an empath, so things like that really affect me.
As I discussed a bit earlier, the diverse cast of Superstore was largely a product of searching for the most talented actors for each role. But as a result of its diverse cast, this created a greater possibility for stories.
Diversity of our cast is the opportunity to throw any kind of issue at this gang and know that everyone's going to be reacting to it from a different point of view, from a different life experience.
This is an underappreciated aspect of diversity within storytelling. If our identities shape how we experience the world, which they certainly do, it's natural to assume that it would have an impact on how we act towards other people. And when people of different walks of life come together, it creates the opportunity for stories to examine topics from a number of different perspectives, ones that a variety of people can relate to from their everyday lives. And Superstore artfully does this without trapping its characters into those identities. In an article for Vulture, Kovie Biakolo explained that writing, "Rather than play into stereotypes or completely ignore them, the show offered an evolved depiction of the region that is closer to the truth, a place of varied people with varied politics that don't fit neatly into the country's dichotomies of conservative or liberal, religious or secular, patriotic or apathetic." One example of that complexity that particularly resonated with me was in the Season 3 episode, Local Vendors Day. Amy, having recently split with Adam, but not yet dating Jonah, goes out with a guy named Alex, played by Vladimir Camaño. Alex, who speaks better Spanish and seemingly has a stronger connection to his heritage, makes Amy feel insecure.
Burritos are from Costa Rica.
Yeah, no, I know. Obviously, they're from other places.
Be careful. I'm gonna have to take away your Latina card.
What am I?
Oh, the short one.
The older one.
Amy's the Miranda one.
Guys, I'm the Latina one.
Sorta.
I guess.
As someone born in a country different from the one my parents were born in, I can absolutely relate to that. When you're caught between two different cultures, wanting to be a part of both, sometimes you feel like you're not a part of either. This is a dynamic America Ferrera has mentioned in past interviews herself, and with her parents being from Honduras and her being born in Los Angeles, she might feel something similar. Regardless, it's the type of story that might not have even occurred to the writers had Ferrera not been a part of the cast. Mateo being undocumented has a powerful impact on his life, to the point where he's arrested by ICE at the end of Season 4, but it would be a mistake to only consider that part of his story. In an interview with Nico Santos, he described playing Mateo saying, "Being undocumented gave me a better understanding of Mateo, but at the end of the day, he's always going to be who he is. He's the snarky guy who can't help himself and will always have a quip. That's what I really like about him. He is who he is and he doesn't apologize. While he may be dealing with what seems like insurmountable circumstances, he's not going to let that define his experience." One big part of Mateo's story is his romantic relationship with Jeff, something that crosses some boundaries since Jeff is Mateo's manager.
Usually don't date white guys, but you know what? Sure, why not? Great!
The relationship doesn't really work, in part because Mateo's undocumented status makes him hesitate to commit, though it's probably for the best as the breakup seems to reveal that Jeff is not in a great place. Mateo is probably most fun when we see how self-serving he can be, like in the episode Tornado when he forms alliances to try and avoid getting laid off.
Why we, as Asians, need to form an alliance. If one of us gets fired, we all walk. We, as gay people, we need to form an alliance.
I'm in.
Actually, I'm not a lesbian.
Girl, what happened to our Catholic alliance? You lied to me.
We have an alliance, right, buddy? Oh, real nice. So much for Dave Matthews fans sticking together.
Mateo's friendship with Cheyenne is another fun part of the character, as the two have several adventures together.
We are trying to create a lifestyle brand / multimedia platform.
Yeah, you obviously don't get Chateo.
Mateo also provides the chance to see a bit of Filipino culture on screen, something Nico Santos was very aware of. He described it saying, I will always jump at the opportunity to infuse my cultural experience into the work that I do. Mateo had spoken Tagalog on the phone in the episode where we found out he was undocumented. I remember when the episode aired, there was a huge response from the Filipino-American community. No one could believe they were hearing Tagalog in an American sitcom. Since the episode, I was constantly bugging the writers for more moments like that, and thank God they came up with that hilarious plotline of Marcus being taken in by our family. The plotline in particular led to a really funny moment between Mateo and Marcus. Marcus is played by John Barinholtz.
Do you work in a warehouse, Marcus? I didn't know because you only mentioned it like a million times.
Okay, that doesn't even make sense. There's no way I could have said a million words. That would have taken years.
Tarantado ka talaga!
Narinig ko yun, gago!
Even if you don't understand the language, you know some bad stuff is being said there. The reason to highlight all of these things is that I want to show how the series provides so much more depth to the character. Even though the threat of deportation hangs over his head, it's not just the peril that makes us care about Mateo. It's that he's an entertaining character who we don't want to see harmed and is fully developed and three-dimensional. The idea of someone being taken away by ICE is a sad one, but when it's someone you know and care about, it makes the impact so much stronger. And also, he feels real. He's neither the innocent, doe-eyed victim or the nefarious rule breaker. He's a complete person whose status adds a shadow over an already complete life. When we see Cheyenne visit Mateo when he's in detainment, you can tell how hard it is for both of them.
The guards think all undocumented people are Latino, so they just keep yelling at me in Spanish, and I don't understand what you're saying. Just want to go home.
Mateo does eventually get out, though that part of his story never quite gets resolved in the series. When he and Amy's brother Eric start dating, that does give him a kind of happy ending, but even if they got married, it wouldn't solve the citizenship question. And when the series ends, that question never gets answered, because it's simply a fact of real life that undocumented people continue to exist in that shadow of uncertainty. Garrett's story is very different. As a veteran of the story, he's dripping with cynicism when we first meet him, and we find that he lives his life a bit more fully outside the workplace, whether it being his hobby of gaming, his sneaker collection, or his various hookups, his most unexpected hookup being with Dina.
Kinda wish I hadn't spent the whole day puking.
Yeah, me too. Find every breath mint left in the store and meet me in the photo lab. 10 minutes, or I start without you.
Although you can imagine these characters hooking up and then moving on, their on-again, off-again relationship also somehow makes sense.
Not gonna happen again.
Oh, no, definitely not.
It might, though.
Hey, you know what? If it did, wouldn't be opposed to it.
Me too. But just the sex part. I find the rest of you repulsive.
Oh, the sound of your voice makes me want to punch myself in the throat.
There's also this really great scene where Dina and Garrett have to clarify their relationship to corporate, seeing as how Dina is the assistant manager and technically Garrett's superior. The main stumbling block is they have no idea what to call their relationship, and in typical fashion, Dina wants to do it through some kind of official procedure.
There are absolutely no feelings of intimacy involved. It could make things a little grayer legally.
Yes,
That's
our point.
Well, thank God we looped in TJ.
They eventually settle on calling their relationship Other.
That's it? Other?
We're very excited about Other, Maureen.
Okay, fine. Other it is.
Legal signs off.
I missed the captain's dinner for this.
Garrett's arc throughout the show is the slow process of learning how to outwardly express his care for the people he works with. While it's pretty well established that he's got a social life outside the store, the disdain he has for his job unfortunately transfers over to the people he works with at times. It probably isn't fair to say that Garrett is entirely indifferent to the people he works with, but rather it's the process of him learning how to express that in a way that is less masked by his sarcasm. But I think it's also true to say that his caring for others expands as the show goes on. At the very least, he's obviously a lot closer to Dina at the end of the series than he was at the beginning, and he has a good friend in Jonah that he didn't have at the beginning of the series.
I think you're a good cook, and you have a pretty decent singing voice, and I think it's sweet how you call your grandma every day. There, see? Was that so hard?
It's fine, we're cool. He's my best friend.
We see a bit of Garrett's social consciousness in the episode Hair Care Products, where the topic of systemic racism comes up when black hair products are finally not the only ones to be kept under lock and key.
Wait, why are those locked up? Can you huff them? Or is it more like a butt thing?
Oh, butt thing? No, I think it's because they think black people are going to steal them.
Yeah, we have to ask for the key. It's like a walk of shame every time you need argan oil.
When Garrett brings up discrimination at the workplace, Dina offers him to take the lead on this, which he begrudgingly accepts, and a meeting is held.
I think a lot of us want to help, but we just have blind spots when it comes to this stuff. I mean, when I was growing up, we were told the goal was to not see race.
Okay, see, I don't know who started telling white people that. I'm assuming it was other white people, but you shouldn't ignore race. You should be aware of how being black affects our daily lives.
Wait, you're black? I thought you were Dominican.
What? No.
The conversation often circles but never quite hits the mark on what is to be done about racism in the workplace. Still, many important issues are raised and at least are brought up as things that need to be addressed by Cloud9. Garrett tries to play the game by the rules he's given, but in the end, when the results of the meeting are sent to corporate, they go inside a bureaucratic machine and he can only hope there will be some kind of impact.
We should get an answer in, 3 to 5 weeks.
Weeks?
Look, I know, it sucks. I built a canoe in less time, but it's a step in the right direction.
I guess.
A frustrated Garrett decides to take matters into his own hands when he destroys Cloud9's racist mascot.
Why was this in the box crusher?
Because it's racist and I was tired of looking at it. And I wasn't gonna wait 3 to 5 weeks for someone else to come fix it.
Got it.
Nope. Wrong.
Yeah, Garrett!
Si se puede!
Not Dominican, man.
This episode reveals, in part, why Garrett is so apathetic. But instead of staying true to form, he tries to make what small change he can from the inside, and then goes a step further by making a direct change from the outside. The fact that this is all happening in Season 6 shows us how much Garrett has grown over the years. It's also an expression of how much he cares. A bald man caring about hair care products demonstrates that it's not simply him being concerned about himself, but rather concern over a community he's a part of. One aspect of Garrett that also works its way into the story is him being in a wheelchair. As described earlier, after the casting of Dunn, Garrett's wheelchair would have vanished entirely had they not made the deliberate decision to include that disability as part of the character so it would still be represented on the show. That said, it is still a bit disappointing that a disabled actor is once again not being given the chance to take one of the few roles that's available to them. Behind the scenes, actress Santina Mua was brought in to work as a consultant on the show to ensure Dunn was using the wheelchair naturally and how to integrate it into the show in a way that was real while still being funny. A fun example of Garrett's disability being used in a plotline is when he is frustrated by a photographer working for the Cloud9 magazine who desperately wants the guy in a wheelchair to appear on the cover.
These corporate magazines love putting employees with disabilities on the cover. Look.
Wow, you were not kidding.
The series also addressed the absence of a disabled actor on the series by bringing in Nicole Lynn Evans for a few episodes in the show's 5th and 6th seasons. Perhaps one of the nicest touches regarding Garrett's disability is that we never really find out how he ended up in the wheelchair, because that's not what defines him.
What if I told you I got shot in Iraq? Or got drunk and hit a bus full of nuns?
Is this also in Iraq?
Whatever it is, it's gonna put me in a box. And I don't want that.
Understood.
Dina's adherence to the rules is tested throughout the series, and a big part of her character's growth is learning how to ease up on sticking to them so rigidly. In an interview early in the show's run, Justin Spitzer described Dina saying, "She has a moral code that she sticks to, and we're trying to figure out in every situation what that code would make her do and have it make sense in her mind. During the walkout, it was intentional that she stayed on corporate's side. It's not because she doesn't like the employees, it's because she follows the rules, and the rules say you stay. She wasn't making the bad choice as much as the moral choice." After the first walkout, we see Dina get a bit of blowback for being a scab.
Let's break up this loser squad and get back to work.
You guys don't hear anything, do you?
Nope, I can't hear traitors.
Oh, is that so, Peter? Because I was just coming to tell you that your wife has died. I just got the call.
I don't have a wife. Everyone knows I'm gay.
Ha! I knew you could hear me in your gay face.
Dina does redeem herself to the audience in the episode, though, when she blackmails Jeff when he threatens to fire Amy over an employee losing a thumb.
Obviously, corporate needs to know that a district manager was on site when an untrained employee maimed himself.
I'm sorry?
God, I really hope this doesn't hurt your shot at that senior VP slot when Todd Sperman retires in June.
It's an interesting depiction of how sticking to the rules can be used both for good and bad ends. It's really just a question of how Dina chooses to follow them. In this case, she's using the rules to Amy's advantage because, as we saw in the previous season, Dina and Amy have started getting a lot closer to one another.
My favorite uncle was a cop. He got me a 22 for my quinceañera.
Here, I thought you were just the second hottest girl at work.
Dina's friendship with Amy is one of the few ways we get to see how there's more to this character than her abrasive, rule-following side. In season 3, Dina even does the unthinkable and gives up her veganism and love of birds to eat a piece of badly cooked chicken to help Amy's Golden Globes party from seeming like a dud. It's this connection and Dina's softening towards everyone in the store that complicates her relationship with the rules. That becomes clearer when we return to the union question in season 5 and we see Dina being helpful in her own way, once again obeying the rules, but this time in a way that advantages her friends.
Company policy states that I need to report any union activity to my manager, so there's been union activity. Now that my hands are clean, I'll go check the security footage.
Amazing. Thank you, Dina.
Dina's relationship with Garrett similarly seemed to soften her. Towards the end of the series, when Dina is dating a veterinarian named Brian, we see the rules once again fail her as she tries to incorporate Garrett into an open relationship.
We will stick a thumbs up sticker everywhere you're allowed to touch Dina.
Now, the thumbs up represents a general green light, but in some cases it's a little more literal. We'll walk you through those when we get there.
Yeah, nope, not doing it.
I'm out.
Dina's use of the rules, along with her strong personality and absolute confidence, come to bear towards the end of the series, when she displays some indecisiveness on deciding which employees keep their jobs, something that's hard to imagine Dina in season 1 doing. It's because at this point, Dina has learned to care more about her fellow workers, seeing them as friends and colleagues. Dina raises deeper questions about the rules in our lives and who makes them. When Dina starts helping her friends instead of towing the corporate line, she's acknowledging indirectly that the rules set up by corporate are not in the best interest of the workers at Cloud9. Although she can't seem to function without rules, by the end of the series, Dina has at least figured out how to apply them selectively according to a higher moral code. It's hard to discuss Cheyenne's story without also discussing Bo. In the first season, the two characters constantly appear together as we see them cooperate to get Bo's music career off the ground.
It's a little bit maybe too political. I just can't think of any other corporate jingles that say God is a black woman.
When we first meet them, they seem like an irresponsible young couple on the fast track to financial ruin. A disapproving Amy doesn't want Cheyenne to rush into marriage like she did.
Well, my mom said that we should save some money, but then Bo was all like, nah, so it's a tough call.
And their wedding is something else.
Then we're gonna need a sick-ass beat. Spitfire, Minister Funkacon.
Yeah. After the wedding, though, we see a little bit less of Bo in the series, and Cheyenne is given the chance to have more of the spotlight on her. But an impression has already been created. She's in a marriage where no one knows what they're doing. Cheyenne's story of growing up and taking on more responsibility began in the first 2 seasons, having a child and then getting married. And when we get glimpses of her personal life, the consistent theme is that they are short of money.
Bo and I were late on the rent last month and this month. She's crazy. She's got like a total boner for rent.
While some of the other employees at Cloud9 have some benefits that come with seniority, Cheyenne is a reminder of what it's like for employees who are starting at the bottom. And unlike Jonah or Mateo, she has other people who require her financial support. We don't really see too much of her home life directly, but there's always this vague sense of disaster whenever she shares details, like the fact that her daughter Harmonica drinks a breakfast soda.
Harmonica was being so difficult. I couldn't get her to finish her breakfast soda.
But there are moments when we get a sense that Cheyenne is brighter than she lets on, like when she tries to devise a complicated carpool schedule that takes into account everyone's individual needs.
For each day of the week, each route has 3 variations, 1 primary and 2 alternates based on shifts and road closures. Now, if you're that week's ride captain...
In later seasons, she starts to take on more responsibilities, like when we see her compete against Jonah for the vacant floor supervisor role in season 6.
Both Jonah and Cheyenne want to be floor supervisors, so we're going to let the people decide.
The people? Glenn, the people are idiots.
And Cheyenne has genuinely great ideas on how to improve things.
For instance, I think we should stagger our shift start time so we're not all clocking in at once.
When she wins the election and becomes the floor supervisor, Cheyenne is very effective in the role. Even though she is unorthodox in her methods, everyone really seems to enjoy her fun way of running things.
Sorry, Justine. Isaac was able to name more Timothée Chalamet movies, so he's on soft lines.
Suck it, Justine. Call me by your name.
Cheyenne is a tough character to pin down because it genuinely feels like so much of her life is still ahead of her. So her journey is less about getting to some kind of big development, but rather seeing her organize her life in a way that's setting her up for taking control of her life in the future. She never really solves her money troubles, but her experience as floor supervisor shows us She's ready to take charge and excel in a role you would never expect her to have in the first season of the series. It's just a shame we never really get more than a hint of who she's going to become in the future. Glenn is a very nice guy. He's also a very religious guy. Mark McKinney describes Glenn saying,
He's a little out of time. He's a little out of step. He's not fully informed. He's accepted a lot of received wisdom. At the same time, he saw something about people that he absolutely believes in. Like, that's his anchor.
Glenn's kindness is both informed and instructed by his Christianity, such as his acceptance of gay people.
I don't know how, but you really seem to have a handle on this whole gay, Oh! That's great, Mateo. Congratulations on that.
It's a refreshing rejection of the dour Christian homophobe stereotype, but Glenn's refusal to be a stereotype does have some interesting limits.
I think Jesus would have been pro-gay marriage.
Absolutely. He would have been pro-gay adoption.
For all we know, Jesus himself was gay.
So it's Tuesday, right?
I don't think Glenn's awkwardness here reflects some deep desire to maintain Jesus Christ's supposed heterosexuality, but rather him being caught completely unaware by a new idea that challenges his assumptions about the world. Being able to identify with Jesus is important to him, but it's also something he takes for granted. Earlier, when he makes a remark about Mateo not understanding what it's like to be stereotyped, it reveals how difficult it is for Glenn to step out of his own shoes.
You can't imagine how hard it is being stereotyped.
Sure.
In spite of all of that, Glenn's kindness cannot be denied, and when he extends it to other people, it's out of a genuine concern for their well-being. He wants the workers of Cloud9 to be happy and live good lives, like when he suspended Cheyenne with pay and she couldn't get maternity leave. So if he can't put himself in someone else's position, it's not because he's some kind of sociopath who lacks empathy, but rather he's a bit naive and often unaware of himself. Glenn's goofy demeanor suggests incompetence, but he's actually a lot brighter than people suspect. In the episode Depositions, when Carol is suing the store after she's electrocuted by the cleaning robot, Jonah tries to cover for Glenn's supposed incompetence, which might have led to Carol getting electrocuted.
I feel like it's unfair to expect somebody like Glenn.
Somebody like Glenn. Is there a competence issue?
No. Glenn can be competent in a lot of ways.
Later in the episode, it's revealed that Glenn is far more competent than Jonah imagined and wasn't responsible for the electrocution.
I kept records of everything, every update, every new hardware install. It's all right here in my calendar.
Then again, Glenn does shock himself in the same episode.
That should not have happened! What is wrong with this?
Glenn is a strange guy, sweet but also clumsy. He's willing to take the heat for his employees, but often doesn't know how to deal with it himself. His faith helps inform his morals, but he also pushes it on people a little too much. In short, Glenn is a walking contradiction that complicates the simple, pleasant Midwestern stereotype you might mistakenly think he is. And Glenn is another example of complexity being created in the characters of Superstore, rejecting one-dimensional interpretations and genuinely asking why someone might, at first, outwardly appear as a stereotype. When the first thing we notice about Glenn is that he's an overly positive religious guy, the fact that he doesn't fit into that stereotype we imagine should lead us to ask ourselves why we assume so much based on that first impression. And that if we meet someone else like Glenn, perhaps in the real world, we'd do better to get to know them rather than to rely on any untested assumptions. And this is true for every character in Superstore. It's very easy to make assumptions about all of them, but they regularly defy the simplicity of the personas that a viewer might imagine. One of Superstore's strengths is its remarkably deep supporting cast. Often these characters are given names, personalities, and entire storylines, and one character who really exemplifies that is Sandra. It all started from a very inauspicious listing for the character.
All it said was, sad sack, plain Jane. And I was like, what time do I show up? I'm ready.
Sandra would appear on the second episode of the series.
It's called slut shaming.
No, he's a victim. You're the only slut in here, Sandra.
Sandra's role was more or less moments like that, getting embarrassed and then awkwardly reacting to it. But Sandra gets a bit more of a storyline in the second season when she pretends that she and Jeff have a secret relationship. But this backfires when she meets Jerry, played by Chris Grace, who's a perfect fit for her.
Does your husband or boyfriend like Vampire Diaries as much as you do?
Oh, I'm not seeing anyone. What about Jeff?
Who's Jeff?
Her serious boyfriend.
With Sandra fake dating Jeff, she isn't able to pursue things with Jerry, so Jerry ends up dating another employee at Cloud9, Carol, played by Irene White. Carol has a very intense personality.
I think we should fire the sluts.
I hope not all of the sluts.
You're not a slut, Justine. Stop trying to seem interesting.
I mean Sandra. She stole my boyfriend and she's bad at zoning.
And when the tornado hits the store, a jealous Sandra leaves Carol to die. Luckily for Carol, she survives, though this starts a very long-running feud that would go through much of the rest of the series. This whole plotline is unfolding in the lives of these supporting cast members in little scenes here and there throughout each episode. It never becomes a primary focus of the series, but it's a subtle reminder that all these characters are people with lives that go on outside of the little quips they exchange with one another. The Carol and Sandra saga would continue with more murder attempts, an illicit affair, and eventually a wedding.
Do you want to get married?
Okay.
What's particularly fun about that proposal is, according to America Ferrera, it was an alternate take that was decided on the day of filming.
The Jerry, will you marry me moment was sort of like an alt.
Yeah, why don't we do it right there? Sure.
It was like an alt in the moment.
And so next season, we saw Sandra get married. In the same season, Kaliko Kauahi became a member of the principal cast. It's quite the evolution of going from having a few odd lines in the first season to becoming a member of the cast by season 5. Sandra and Carol were far from the only store employees who got some time in the spotlight. Kelly Schumann described her becoming Justine in an interview, saying, "When I auditioned, it did say it was possibly recurring, but it was just one line. I had a great experience, but I left thinking, I don't know if I did enough for them to notice." Cut to several weeks later, and they were like, "We want to bring you in for this episode."
You know what should be in Mythical? A man who knows where the G-spot is.
Justine, contributor leave.
It's the third time you've made that joke.
Marcus is another memorable face that, in addition to living with Mateo's family, also has some other adventures throughout the series.
Promotion with no raise. Well done.
Thank you. It just goes to show you keep your head down, you do the work, get your thumb cut off, and agree not to sue. Anything can happen.
Amir Krangi described his time playing Saeed, saying, "I've played a range of characters, but when it has been Middle Eastern Arab, it's generally been cliché. Terrorist or terrorist boss or all of those. The villain. Saeed just happens to be a funny character who just happens to have that background. There are more dimensions to the guy. He's allowed to have flaws. He's allowed to have his good points."
I'm gonna go play Pokemon Go. I hear there's a Snorlax near the loading dock.
And who can forget the absolute legend that is Brett, played by Brett Kobashigawa.
Hey, Brett, I'm mad at you. Let's fight. Put that away, you psycho!
There are so many more characters and actors that could be mentioned here, but to close out this section, I think a special mention needs to be made for Linda Porter, who played Myrtle.
How much he liked my sweater.
Oh, well, is that really that bad?
He meant he liked what's under my sweater.
Myrtle's story arc involved getting fired for her age, only to be replaced by a virtual Myrtle.
Plus, you can change the background. She's flying.
Who would want this?
She appeared in many other gags and jokes throughout the series and was generally a bright spot whenever she was on camera. Sadly, while the series was airing though, Linda Porter passed away at the age of 86 after a long battle with cancer. In the show's 5th season, in the episode titled Myrtle, the character Porter played also passed away, and she was remembered by her work colleagues.
And she was really getting a lot less racist towards the end.
Yeah. She still called me Moana sometimes, but at least she saw the movie. Representation matters.
What I especially enjoyed from Linda Porter was her explaining why she thought skiing was the most beautiful thing there is. This video was taken by one of her castmates, Mark McKinney.
You know, before you go above tree level, all the trees are glistening with ice like diamonds. It's so beautiful, silver in the sunlight. You cannot do anything that is more beautiful than skiing.
We're supposed to be going to the Aloha Thunder Indoor Water Park for a sex weekend, but it turns out they're closing.
As Superstore's 5th season approached its end, it was renewed for a 6th season, a rarity for sitcoms on NBC in 2020. But just a few weeks later, we found out that the show would be going into that 6th season without its biggest star, America Ferrera. In February of 2020, Ferrera posted the news on her Instagram, explaining how, as much as she loved the show, she would be moving on. The statement was vague, though later on it would be elaborated that Ferrera wanted to spend more time with her family, having recently given birth to her second child, and focus on several other projects she had been working on. To prepare for Amy's departure, it was written into the show that she had been offered a new job as an executive in California, and she takes the job in the episode titled California Part 1.
A high-paying corporate job where I'll never have to say the words raccoon carcass again. I think I might take it.
The episode raises Amy's concerns over being part of the unfeeling corporate machine and her relationship with Jonah. Amy tells herself that she can make a difference, but Jonah is skeptical.
I think I could make a difference.
For $1 billion corporation.
I don't have a degree, or like family connections, or like any other options. This is my chance.
Amy had resisted the urge to sell it entirely when she became store manager, but becoming an executive is a whole other layer of commitment to a business. It's easy to see Amy's side that she doesn't have much in the way of options to improve her life. She talks about being store manager the same way she talked about being a lower-level worker. It's almost like we're supposed to forget she's making 6 figures a year and has great benefits. Her keeping that job for the rest of her life actually sounds pretty good. To move to California pulls her even deeper into the corporate system, and while she says she's hoping to change it from the inside, becoming a part of that system, and being generously rewarded for that, makes it hard to believe she would oppose it as fiercely as when she was being marginalized by it. The subtext of the scene is how it's an open question what will happen between Amy and Jonah, but the episode ends with Jonah offering to go with Amy to California.
That guy you're seeing should just go with you.
And so one would expect this episode to be followed by California Part 2, but unfortunately I have to remind everyone of what was going on in the real world in 2020. Production of Superstore's Season 5 finale had to be suspended when the COVID-19 pandemic forced TV and film operations to be halted while much of the world self-quarantined. The exception to these rules were essential workers, that is, people who were needed to work in person to keep vital parts of society like supply chains functioning. That included workers at retail outlets like Walmart. With the new reality staring the show in the face, the creative team behind Superstore realized they had to reflect it in the show's 6th season. Ben Feldman said in an interview, "When everything shut down, we all went home from playing these goofy little grocery store workers on TV, while our real-life counterparts stayed at work and became these life-risking frontline heroes. It energized us. We felt like we owed it to these people to tell the story right." Nico Santos expressed something similar, saying, "We owed it to the essential workers and the people that we portray in the show to honor them and not shy away from what they were going through. Our show has never shied away from uncomfortable topics, so why would we shy away from this? It was never a question for us." According to an article in Vulture that details the various challenges the show faced at the time, Superstore would be one of the first shows to go back into production, a test case for filming something during COVID. The show had to make some changes to reflect everyone's new normal, such as workers wearing masks while out on the store's main floor. The masks made it difficult to hear the actors, and in some scenes you get the impression that lines were recorded after filming. The actors also had to work harder to show expressions on their face with the bottom half covered up. There was also the question as to whether or not wearing masks, which had become politicized during the pandemic, would alienate viewers. Ben Feldman responded to that saying, "F*** them. If they haven't left after empathizing with an undocumented worker and the gun rights episode and abortion and labor laws, if they're still with us, they're going to stick around for masks." Dealing with COVID was thematically appropriate for the show, as writer Owen Ellickson expressed. It's always been a little bit of a show about underdogs, people at the mercy of these big forces that are well beyond their control. In some ways, COVID fits in perfectly natural with that. COVID is just another thing that these people are struggling against. There was, of course, the lingering problem of what to do about the missing second part of their Season 5 finale, the episode that was supposed to be America Ferrera's departure from the series. Ferrera agreed to come back to shoot 2 more episodes. The first one showing how everyone was dealing with the pandemic, and then a second to send her on her way to California. Watching the first of those episodes, Essential, creates a strange feeling in 2024. It moves through those early phases of the pandemic and reminds us of the uncertainty of that period.
More cases are popping up in Oregon, Washington, New York.
You guys, Tom Hanks has it.
What? No. What about Rita? Does it say anything about Rita?
And Superstore helpfully reminds us all that the store's new owner, Zephra, cares just as much about the employees as the previous owners.
Look at what came today! Safety supplies! What is that?
Anti-looting procedures.
When the episode ends, it sends us right back to where the story left off from its season 5 finale. Amy is going to California, and Jonah is still planning on going with her. In California Part 2, that possible future seems to be up in the air when Amy begins to suspect that Jonah is planning to propose, and she isn't ready to get married.
I'm blowing my life up for you. The least you could do is answer the question. Do you want to marry me?
I don't know.
That's not an answer, yes or no.
Then no.
And Jonah decides that he's not going to California.
We live together, we work together, we're raising Parker together. I don't know what else you need to know. And I think I deserve a little more than just see how it goes. When we first met, you told me that all your days felt the same and you felt trapped. And I don't want to be the reason that you feel like that again.
As the episode ends, everyone is watching fireworks, a lot like they were looking up at the stars on the ceiling in the very first episode. And the episode ends with Jonah and Amy sharing one last look. It was a really sad goodbye, and one that came together after much discussion between Ferreira, Feldman, and the show's other producers. Gabe Miller, one of the producers and a co-showrunner at the time, said, "We definitely discussed other options and even entertained the idea of them dating long distance. But when we thought about how that would actually play out on the show, it seemed like it might be actually more frustrating for viewers to think that Amy is just on the other side of Jonah's phone calls, and eventually that would peter out and we'd end up having to do an off-camera breakup, which really wouldn't feel right." Jonathan Green, another producer and the other co-showrunner at the time, also said that COVID made the breakup feel more real, as it was an additional element putting their relationship under stress. The director for California Part 2, Victor Nelly Jr., discussed filming it, saying, "It was hard. The whole crew wants to hug and they can't, and everyone was so separated in masks and plastic shields, sitting apart from each other. But there was a moment at the end where all the actors got together in a circle, really thanking each other. We were crying. It was beautiful." Although Ferreira's departure was disappointing, the episode did leave the door open for a possible return, likely in a series finale. Ferreira said in an interview, "We set it up that Amy was going to work at corporate, knowing that there was always an opportunity for her to play a role in the end of the show. At the time, I didn't know Superstore was going to go on for 5 more years or 10 more years. Who knows? So my wish for the show was that it just continued on and on and on and kept on going, and that I could start pursuing some of the other creative endeavors that I had been building towards and that I'm starting to do now. But sadly for the series, its 6th season would be its last."
The Americans is really good.
You watched it.
I did. I mean, I watched basically everything, pandemic.
NBC announced that Superstore would be ending with its 6th season on December 3rd, 2020. Although season 6 would be a shortened 15 episodes, it still had another 11 to air after that announcement was made. Season 6 has a distinct vibe compared to the rest of the series, and I suspect it's because Amy's absence can really be felt. Though with the series ending, it turns out she wouldn't be gone for very long. In total, Amy was only absent for 10 episodes. In an interview, Justin Spitzer discussed what it was like to get America Ferrera back for the finale. "As soon as we were told that the show was ending, we called her and said we'd love it if you could do 1 or 2 more episodes, and she was immediately on board. It just felt like the series finale would not have felt like the end without her. We knew we wanted her to come back to the end of this." This set up the 2-part finale, the first part titled Perfect Store, and the second part titled All Sales Final. Both episodes aired on March 25th, 2021. After learning 95% of Cloud9 stores are set to close, Amy heads back to the Ozark Highlands store to try and keep it open. In an interesting reversal of positions, we see Jonah running out of his characteristic optimism.
"I'm not sure that there's anything that we can do. I'm just trying to be realistic. I mean, we've been flattened by these guys over and over. I don't know what to say."
Amy is hoping for a good review from a corporate inspection, thinking that might save the store. But it's nearly ruined when a bag with 8 severed feet is discovered. A new record for severed feet found in the store at one time. When the news shows up, amidst this absolutely gruesome discovery, Jonah tries to talk up the store, hoping to change the corporate inspector's opinion.
"When it rains, when it snows, when it tornadoes, when there's a plague and you're all safe at home, except for when you come here to cough, we're here, just trying to get you what you need. And all we want is to keep doing that."
Amy also makes an attempt to change the inspector's mind, but it doesn't really matter because the decision has already been made to turn the store into a fulfillment center, and most of the people there are losing their jobs. Although Amy is apparently still able to keep hers.
You can't just do this to us.
Well, Amy, you'll keep your job.
No, I won't. Because I quit.
In All Sales Final, we move forward 1 month to find out that Amy has moved back to St. Louis and everyone else is preparing for the store to close. There are a lot of fun details in this finale, such as the creator Justin Spitzer showing up as a store customer to get a hug from Glenn.
Thank you so much for your help.
You're so welcome.
The coronavirus.
Spitzer's daughter also appears in one of the small interstitials between each scene, reprising her role as Girl on Potty. And there are numerous other callbacks to the first episode of the series. We also find out the origin for the severed feet that were constantly found in the store, and it was Elias. I know I haven't mentioned him much, but he appears in almost every episode and says next to nothing. Each of the main characters wraps up their story. Glenn is reopening his family hardware store. Mateo and Cheyenne are both taking jobs working with him. Dina becomes manager of the fulfillment center, with Sandra being her assistant manager. And Garrett and Dina decide to become a couple. As for Amy and Jonah, the two finally confront each other over their feelings.
I hated how you believed that life could be better than it was. And yet here we are. And my life is so much better than it was. Because of you. So if I have to wait
The episode ends with a long speech from Garrett as we flash forward to see all the characters living happily ever after. The brief flashes are an assuring vision that things are going to be okay. And we get these final words from Garrett.
Cloud 9 is now closed.
It was a very sweet finale. There's something about the happy ending that sitcoms simply cannot resist. Even though, looking at this two-parter, Cloud 9 team lost their fight to keep the store open, and they all had to start their lives over again. While this could have been a cold reminder of the corporate machine that can never be defeated, the fact that everyone is happy and living a great life afterwards suggests that maybe that corporate machine didn't have the power they thought it did, and that a job can only keep you from happiness if you let it. It would have been nice to have seen the Cloud 9 team making their working class jobs better, but there is something noble in the attempt to at least try and improve things. And even in that failure, it doesn't define who they are as people or prevent them from achieving a happiness in their lives. In an interview, executive producer Gabe Miller said, "The one thing that did feel right to us is that there would be a final push to fight corporate and stop this from happening, but they wouldn't succeed. It felt right for everyone to try, but it also felt like the show taking place as close to reality as we can, and retail is moving in this direction. It might feel too easy or too much of a cheat if our particular store was saved from that. We decided it was right for the story to have this happen. We just wanted to reassure our audience that our employees would go on knowing each other and being okay."
Hey, take care of the old gal, will you?
I will.
Following the ending of Superstore, there was an attempt to create a spin-off featuring Beau and Cheyenne. The series would have been produced by Superstore writers Bridget Kyle and Vicky Liu, and although they had written a script for the pilot, NBC passed on the idea. Superstore did find some life in Mexico with a Spanish-language adaptation titled Supertitlan. It's a bit strange to watch, especially since episodes run nearly twice as long at roughly 40 minutes each. And even though there was only one season, it has 48 episodes, meaning its runtime is actually almost as long as the originals. Superstore has also had a life making cameos on other American TV shows, with Cloud 9 existing in the world of Good Girls, The Mindy Project, I Feel Bad, and Kenan. Also, as some bonus info I wanted to include, during the 2020 Superstore Comic-Con panel, producer Gabe Miller shared that one unused story idea was that Jonah was originally going to be a corporate spy.
And at one point, there was an idea that for the season 1 finale, we would be starting at Cloud9 corporate, and we wonder why we're there, what are we doing? And then we see Jonah walk in and reveal that he was a corporate spy infiltrating a Cloud9 store to report on unit activity.
I really want to see that bizarro version of Superstore. Following the end of Superstore, America Ferrera has been very busy. She is preparing to direct her first feature film, an adaptation of the book I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter. She was also nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress for her role in the Barbie movie, and most recently it was announced she will star and executive produce in a series about artist Anna Medieta. Ben Feldman has gone on to appear in several TV shows and movies. He starred in Population 11, voiced a character in the Disney series Monsters at Work, and appeared in the Netflix movie A Tourist's Guide to Love. He's also cast to appear as a series regular on the upcoming season of Mayfair Witches. Colton Dunn recently appeared in The Recruit on Netflix and has done voice work on a number of programs, including Big City Greens, Middlemost Post, and my personal favorite, Lower Decks. Lauren Ash appeared in the series Not Dead Yet and has done voice work for She-Ra and the Princesses of Power and Chicago Party Aunt. Outside of acting, she currently hosts a podcast with her cousin, Christy Oxborough, titled True Crime and Cocktails, and in 2023, she released her first 2 singles. Nico Santos recently appeared in the movies Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Happiness for Beginners, and The Re-Education of Molly Singer. Most recently, he made an appearance on the series Not Dead Yet and was a voice on several episodes of Haley's on It. Following Superstore, Nicole Sakura joined the cast of Maggie and would voice the titular character in the English dub of the movie Suzume. She's also made an appearance on the series Ghosts. Mark McKinney would star in The Kids in the Hall reunion series for Prime, once again assembling with the rest of his former sketch comedy team. He also recently appeared in the movie Scared Shitless. Kaliko Kwahi appeared in episodes of American Auto and the most recent incarnation of iCarly. She's also scheduled to be a part of the principal cast of another Justin Spitzer comedy series, St. Denis Medical, currently scheduled to premiere in November of 2024. One of the real shames of Superstore is that it's a show that probably would have done better had it premiered 10 or 15 years earlier, when network television had a larger share of the audience's attention, which would have translated to stronger broadcast ratings and a clearer indication of its overall popularity. Much in the way retail has taken a hit from online shopping, so has network television taken a hit from online streaming. Superstore has found an audience online as well, but it's a type of success less immediately obvious to traditional media companies. In an Instagram video ahead of the final episode of Superstore, America Ferrera touched on why she thought the show was canceled.
I think that networks for years now have been so confused about how to even measure success with network television because streaming has so changed the game.
During an interview following the end of the series, America Ferrera said, "I will say that the most compelling thing about this show, when I first read the pilot, was that these were people and faces that we so rarely get to see, whose lives so rarely get the spotlight and attention or get humanized, dignified, and through laughter. I'm so used to seeing a diverse cast through a tragic drama where our lives are gritty and barren. But to see us through the lens of laughter and joy and camaraderie and wit and humor and intelligence, it reminded me of all the Norman Lear comedies. It reminded me of a show like that for this generation. How do we make the vast majority of the American workforce be seen, and feel, in a way, dignified? Because their lives are worthy of our attention and are worthy of being told. That has always, for me, been the driving force." I think that very beautifully captures the spirit of Superstore. It showed us the many different faces of working class America and let them be on TV for a little bit of fun. It was a nice reminder that people don't all experience being working class the same way, but they do experience it together. And there's something beautiful about everyone laughing together. I am one of those people who discovered Superstore through streaming. Specifically, when I decided to make this video because it was a show I was always curious about. I'm glad I did because it really is a great series and holds up throughout its entire run. While it would have been nice for it to go even longer than it did, like many of those long-lived sitcoms of the past, it's great that it went out on a high note and still maintained that quality right to the very end. And if you think this video maintained a level of quality and is going out on a high note of its own, perhaps you'd like to become a patron or member for this channel and support me financially so I can create more great videos like this. The lovely names you see coming up the screen now are all people who have joined the $5 tier, which gives them their name in the credits, of course, but also early access to videos and fun little bonuses I throw in every now and again. But if you would like to support this channel in a non-monetary fashion, you can like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. And thank you all so much for watching.
That was so good. That could seriously be on YouTube.